Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. Assalamu alaikum. And it's so brilliant to be here. Very excited to be speaking to this wonderful guest today. This is a series of conversations that I'm having with Muslim women and women from other faith backgrounds, women who have been through their own challenges and sort of overcome them and going to be sharing some of that with us, or women who have seen a problem, a challenge, and actually taken it on and tried to change it. Someone who's trying to make a difference in the world. So all sorts of different speakers that I'm speaking to. And today I'm very, very happy and honored to be speaking to Hind Makki, all the way in the USA. Somebody who I haven't actually met in person, but we've connected on social media as we do nowadays, and I do feel like I know her. We had a brilliant chat on the phone last week and connected once again, and I felt like I was speaking to myself in some ways because of so many of the things that we had in common. So Hind, assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for accepting this invitation.
Wa alaikum assalam. It is, well, did it? I don't even know what just happened.
That's it. You're back now. You're back now. Carry on. Carry on.
Yeah, I'm back. Okay. Well, wa alaikum assalam. This is par for course. I think this is very on brand for 2020. It's my my honor to have this conversation with you, and thank you very much for the invitation. Like you, I also feel that even though we haven't met in person yet, we've sort of collaborated over the years and discussed our twin challenges that we have on both sides of the Atlantic, you know, around women in the mosque. And inshallah, that's what we will hopefully be talking about this afternoon for me, this evening for you.
Indeed. So Hind, give us an idea of you, who you are, your background, and also where are we speaking to you from right now? Where are you based, and a bit about you, really, to set the scene for us.
Sure. Well, I live outside of Chicago, in the suburbs of Chicago, and I was born and raised in the American Midwest to immigrants to the United States from Sudan, and they chose to raise our family in a particular mosque community, which is one of the largest Arabic-speaking mosques in the Chicagoland area, and I think it's kind of in some ways my origin story as well in this work, because I grew up attending a very dynamic mosque. And I grew up, you know, over the course of my growing up, I saw how the mosque itself responded to the growth of a large community. And so just to kind of give the viewers an idea of this mosque, today it serves over 35,000 people. It is one of the flagship masajid in the Chicagoland area. It's like probably the sort of the central Arabic speaking one. But when I was growing up, certainly did not have 35,000 people visiting it per week. And when I was young, like when I was 3-4 years old, I remember that men and women prayed in the same musalla, in the same prayer space. And, you know, I should also say it's one of the first mosques in the area that was built purposefully as a mosque. So it has a musalla, it has a dome, it has, you know, classrooms, a recreational space downstairs, a kitchen, things like that. Things maybe that we take for granted today, but it wasn't typical when I was growing up. But as I was growing up and the community was growing larger, what happened was that women started to be asked to pray outside of the main prayer hall. So when I was about 12 and I would start to regularly go to Tarawih prayers in Ramadan, I remember praying in classrooms. And then when I was about 16, we would pray in the basement, which it's not actually as bad as it sounds. It's a pretty nice, clean basement. It's very airy. It's, you know, well lit. But you definitely got the sense that, you know, this is a huge mosque and they're trying to figure out how to give space to everyone who attends. And they didn't kick women out. They didn't say, women, you can't come to the mosque, but they certainly That was their reaction. And then the other piece of that for me is that I attended an all-girls Islamic high school, which was at the time housed in that very same mosque. And so during the day, on the weekdays, I would pray in the main prayer hall, right? But for Friday prayers, we would pray downstairs with the rest of the women. And for me, I always felt ownership of the mosque as a religious and sacred space for my religion, because I was there, all the time during the school days. And, that was the place where, we learned about Harriet Tubman and Our Lady Aisha, radiallahu anha, right? And so for me, the mosque was a place where I built community with other girls. I was educated in religious sciences as well as secular studies. I prayed there, and I felt very, very comfortable there. And so when I grew older and I encountered other mosques that were not welcoming at all to women, it was a huge shock for me. And I understand that it's almost a privilege. Essentially it's a privilege to me for having been a woman, a young woman, and feeling so comfortable in the mosque. It's a privilege that other girls don't actually have, unfortunately. And it's, men think of it as their right, but for women, we think of it as a privilege.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic story. I particularly love the way you mentioned Harriet Tubman and Aisha, because I think that it really kind of sums up what we need in many ways. And actually, often we actually don't necessarily merge these things very well together, but I guess we can unpick some of that. So the reason that you and I have connected is because you set up something. I won't say the name, you can say it yourself, but it's the most fantastic name of a campaign of this nature. And I mentioned it to somebody recently, not somebody who's Muslim, and I was explaining this conversation and what you've done, and she also thought it was the most amazing name. So please give us a sense of that campaign, that project, and how it came about and when, and what was the kind of trigger moments for you that really motivated you to do it?
Yes. So the name of the site / movement / hashtag is Side Entrance. And it's at its core, it's a crowd-funded site on Tumblr that asks women and girls to share pictures and stories of their experiences in mosques. And ideally for me, I love to see side-by-side, depictions of the women's prayer space and the men's prayer space in the same hall, in the same mosque. And so essentially that's what it started out as. And I started it in 2012. There were several different trigger points, but one of the main ones was that I was in downtown Chicago one day, and I had to pray Asr before it ended. And I dipped into a mosque that is, it's another flagship mosque in the city. It's really well known. And at that time, the women's prayer space outside of Friday prayers, because in Friday they had a bigger space, but the women's prayer space was a small rectangular hall. And I'm not joking when I say hall, it really was like a corridor, roughly 6 feet wide and 20 feet long. And, I went in there, I had to pray. So I prayed, and I just thought it was amusing. I snapped a picture and I posted it on my Facebook wall. And I immediately got 2 different kinds of reactions. And the first one was from women who were not surprised, and especially women from Chicago. They say, "Oh, okay, you're downtown," because I live in the suburbs. So they knew exactly which mosque that I was in, and nobody was surprised. But the other response was from my male friends who were shocked. They literally, responded saying, "Wait, you're actually at a mosque, like at a masjid? You're not at like some random warehouse or some random place. Like you're at a mosque." And I said to them, not only am I at a mosque, I'm at one that you probably visited, that you probably prayed in if you've ever come to the city of Chicago. And a really robust conversation ensued, wherein I realized that women, whether they were raised Muslim or they were converted into the faith, needed a space for catharsis to share their perspectives, and to just talk about, like, this is really not normal, right? Like, for us having to pray in these kinds of spaces, and that for men who are our natural allies, they should be, and many of them want to be, they just, because most of our mosques are gender segregated, they honestly don't even realize, especially at that time, they didn't realize, you know, the inferior places where women prayed. And so I thought, okay, this is a great way to get our allies to understand our experiences. And that's when I asked, that's why I launched Side Entrance. I asked people to share their experiences with the aim, not to name and shame, but the aim to name the problem and change the situation on the ground. And I think, you know, alhamdulillah, I mean, since 2012, a lot of things have changed, not just because of Side Entrance, but I think that Side Entrance helped to catalyze a national conversation in the U.S. and in concert, of course, with the conversations occurring in the U.K., in South Africa, in Canada, and all over the world, really, about women's access to sacred space, and also about women's religious leadership in our community.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder what are the sort of similarities and what are also the differences between, say, the UK and the US? I mean, what have you found? You obviously have sort of a bit of an insight into the UK too, and I wonder, do you think what differences do you think there are in terms of what you have come across? Because I think you've had pictures from here too, right? So those pictures could be from anywhere, couldn't they? I mean, these pictures are all fairly similar, I guess, in nature, none of which are very good. And I think your point about the reaction from women and then the reaction from men is very interesting. And I've certainly seen in my own life as a Muslim 25 years, and then I explain it in this way, that I had a very bad experience in year one. I've had a very bad experience, say, last year, and I've had lots in between, and that's not okay. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're talking about the same stuff. And of course, to be honest with you, every woman I speak to has a story, at least one or more, of this nature. And so I think, but equally, exactly as you've said, men really have no idea most of the time. And I know, even having conversations with friends, even with my husband, sometimes even mentioning that, you know, sometimes women have to pray on a concrete floor, and they're kind of, what? And you're thinking, yeah, that's kind of normal for many people, and to not know which direction the Qibla is, and is the speaker on or not, and has the prayer started or not. And, you know, I think you're going back to your point where you said about growing up and ownership. You know, this is the exact opposite of that, isn't it? This is about women not even feeling part of a place. I mean, you know, that's really what it is, isn't it?
I remember I was about 14 or 15 years old the first time I experienced not being let into a mosque. And I remember it very, very clearly because my mom had been traveling abroad. And so my dad and my sister and I, every Friday, we would drive out to a mosque and, eat the food of the culture. And then, obviously like pray in the mosque culture. And this was during the time of the Yellow Pages. So like Googling, hey, like what kind of, is this mosque open? Does it have space for women? Like, no, you go to Yellow Pages and you find a mosque. And it was really, really incredible. In the summer, we went to a Bosnian mosque, we went to Arab mosque, South Asian, African American mosque. And I remember we went to a South Asian mosque in the city and on Devon Avenue. If any folks from the U.S. are watching this, they'll know Devon is really well known for being kind of the hub of Asia, South Asian, culture in Chicago. And I think you all would pronounce it as Devon, but we say Devon. So we go to this mosque, and my father, my sister, and me, and we are trying to enter, trying to look for where's the women's prayer space. And an older uncle comes to us, and he just he doesn't even look at us. He barks at my father. He says, "No women, no women." And my dad's looking at him like, like, where am I supposed to put them? And it wasn't a purposefully built mosque, it's kind of a renovated space. And it was dark, the parking lot was dark. It didn't seem very safe. And this was pre-cell phone era, so nobody had a mobile phone. And the man just said, "No women, no women." And my sister and I, it was literally the first time that we ever even encountered this idea that maybe we wouldn't be allowed into a mosque. And it was shocking. And it had not been my experience even in other South Asian mosques. But it wasn't going to be the first time that I was blocked from even entering a mosque during prayer time. And you're thinking in different countries, and you're thinking, am I not a Muslim? Like I also have to pray. I also have the right to be in this space. And I really, and I think it's a real shame that is what women and girls are just fighting for, just the right for something that wasn't even a question during the Prophet's time, peace be upon him. It was not up for debate that the prayer space, that the community function of a mosque and the sacred function of a mosque was for women and girls as well as men and boys. Right. And I just sometimes I stop and think, I cannot believe that we're still fighting for this. Why are we still fighting for this? And and it shouldn't even be like this should not even be what we're spending our energy on.
Of course. And what is it that keeps you going? I mean, you did side entrance 8 years ago, and it's a long time to be highlighting and showing. Have you also been able to showcase the good mosques, the examples where it is good happening well? That, I guess, gives you a bit of energy. But what is it that motivates you to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. From the beginning, side entrance of it is to showcase the adequate, the pathetic, the beautiful, the adequate, and the pathetic. So I do always want to highlight and elevate the spaces that are not just beautiful, but also functional as a prayer space for the entire community. I remember there's a series of photos that somebody had submitted of a Bosnian American mosque in the American South. And, it's a small masjid. It looks like it was, a small community. I'm not sure what the socioeconomic background of it is, but the series of photographs depict the community in the month of Ramadan, where the men were opening their fast outside because there wasn't space enough for everyone to eat together, and the women were inside. But the imam decided also to go inside as well with the women, to pray with them, to make dua with them, to ask them if they needed anything from him. And then, afterwards, I believe it's in the same series of the same masjid, where there's photos of the Tarawih prayers and of kids playing in the background. So I really love that. And then for me, it's not about the multi-million-dollar mosque with these opulent spaces where men and women are praying in the same space. It's about the community that you're engendering, that you're creating. And, I would never say, oh no, that mosque should have created a way for men and women to eat together and pray together. No, because the idea was they were looking at the limitations of the space and saying, no, we're going to go beyond that and still provide spiritual care to everyone, whether they're men and women. And I actually wanted to go back quickly to one of the questions in the UK communities, and I think the most salient one for me, it's less a question around socioeconomic background and more about the racial and ethnic diversity of the communities. So the U.S. Muslim community is one of the most diverse racial and ethnic Muslim communities in the world. I think maybe only Canada might have, might be similar in terms of the racial diversity of the Muslim community. And it's certainly the most racially diverse religious community in the United States. And because of that, you have Muslims literally from all over the world who are bringing in their cultures and providing a model for other Muslims. And so you can see in the same city or in the same area mosques that don't let women in, and then mosques that have women as the board president, right? And a lot of that does come from a cultural background, but also a religious interpretation that stems from, you know, wherever area of the world that people are from, or what madhab they follow, and things like that. And I think the diversity of the U.S. Muslim community is actually an asset, because you can learn from one another, whether it's, you can learn from the different architecture, right? So you have a lot of Turkish, Bosnian communities will have like a mezzanine or a balcony space on top, and that's where women are praying. And so now you have a lot of other, I think that was like an Ottoman kind of architectural thing. And now you have a lot of other mosques that are copying that and incorporating that into their design and having women pray up on a mezzanine. And, you know, these are really, these are pretty important. And I've just kind of noticed anecdotally as well that you have a lot of Arab American mosques that, you know, it's never a question whether women can enter or not enter, but it's a question of like, okay, where are they going to pray, right? And so I think that's another thing that people can learn from. Why is it that certain communities seem to not have a problem with inclusion? And here, and I'll just end with this, is like the gold star community is certainly the African American Sunni community of Imam Waris bin Muhammad, who mosques are, it's not even a question of whether or not women are integrated, because women really are, in terms of their leadership structure and also in terms of access to the prayer halls, and in terms of education, early education, who's doing that. So I really believe that our communities would do really, really well to learn from one another and to exchange ideas with each other, to see how all of us are trying to respond to this challenge of providing spiritual support.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. We have diverse Muslim communities here too, but I'm sure, as you say, yours is the most diverse, and that brings with it so much beauty and blessing, as well as challenges, of course. And then when you throw in, and then when you throw in the kind of socioeconomic stuff, and you know, the discrimination and all of it, how it weaves together, and even, you know, I guess racism within Muslim communities. I mean, all of this is on our plate, right, to try and kind of weave our way through. I think what's interesting, I feel like our numbers are similar, which I hadn't really realized until we were speaking recently. We have, they say, I don't know exactly, but around 2,000 mosques, and I think you guys do too, and about 3 million Muslims. We maybe have slightly less, but I think the number is getting to that point now. Which is interesting, because of course you have a huge amount of space where those, you know, where people are spread out with pockets in different cities, I guess. And similarly, we would have, you know, obviously much smaller country. We have areas which have many Muslims in, and there are still areas of the country where you don't really have Muslims at all. And so that I find interesting, and I think it would be good for us to sort of map stuff together on where we're at. What do you think has changed? I mean, are you seeing changes for the better, the awareness, the kind of more people speaking about this stuff? Where do you think you're at with that in the US?
Yes, first of all, you're correct. There's a lot of similarities between and parallels between the US and the UK Muslim communities. I would say that, just based on my observation, I think because the concentration of Muslims in the UK is higher than it is in the US, it seems like the British Muslim communities have more impact on your societies than we are able to do yet here in the U.S. And so that's always very inspiring and encouraging for me to see kind of the broad impact of in politics or in entertainment and sports, in leadership in the UK by the Muslim communities there. It's really amazing. The changes that I've seen, actually, I have seen changes, right? It's not all doom and gloom, which I think is wonderful. And I think the thing about social media campaigns or starting these conversations, the point I hope that people take away is that it's not about naming and shaming and just saying, oh, this is a problem, and then walking away. It's about stating the problem so that we can come together to help find a solution. And so what happened in the US, first of all, this is not new. I didn't pioneer any of this. There were many, many women and some male allies who had been working on this issue for decades. One of them is one of my mentors, is Sister Aisha Al-Adawiya, who is kind of, I like to describe her as like the elder stateswoman of American Muslims. She's the founder of Women in Islam, Inc. from like the 1990s. And she had been talking about these issues for decades, and not just talking about them, working with male leadership on this issue. And I think we just kind of came to a crescendo at around 2014, 2015, when the conversation became mainstream. And so before that time, a lot of the women who had been raising these issues were told, you're fringe, your aqidah is not sound, and so we're not going to listen to you, right? But by the time 2014, 2015 came around, they couldn't say that because there were so many different women from all the different kind of the spectrum of ideological views that it couldn't be something that was ignored anymore. And a couple of really important things happened. One of the first is that there was a study commissioned by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, which is a think tank that researches the American Muslim communities, and with which I'm affiliated. And I was an advisor to the study in 2014 called Reimagining Muslim Spaces. And it didn't just focus on women, but it focused on the idea of inclusive mosques in general, and how can mosques be more inclusive to marginalized kind of demographics, particularly converts, young people, and women, but everyone really. And then the second was the ISNA, which is an umbrella Sunni organization in the US and Canada. They, along with the North American Fiqh Council, came up with, they had this essentially campaign around building welcoming masajid. And on the one hand, on the ISNA side, they came up with a statement. We, and I was also involved with this, developed a suite of trainings and other kind of consultation methods with mosques around the country to try to look at specifically around women's access to mosques, how they can build that, and how they can encourage masajid to return to what we termed as the prophetic model, right? And then the twin aspect of that is the Fiqh Council of North America actually came up with a fatwa. They first came up with a statement in 2015 and then a fatwa in 2018, which I believe they still have yet to like really put some meat on the bones, but at least the bones are there. That essentially it says three things, and that is no mosque in the United States should bar women from entering, number one. Number two, every mosque in the United States should allow a woman to pray where she wants to pray without a barrier. That has been the most controversial. And then number three, every mosque in the United States should allow for and encourage women to run for every position on the board. And that is actually where we've seen, I think, the most movement. And now you see a lot of mosques, and we have about 2,000 or 2,100 mosques around the country. More than 2/3 of them allow in their constitution women to run for any position on the board. I'm not yet aware of any study that looks at how many women actually are on the boards, but I've anecdotally seen a lot of movement on this, and this idea of not just allowing women to run for positions, but also encouraging them and creating an atmosphere that is welcoming to women board members. So yeah, I mean, that keeps me going. I think these changes are really important, and inshallah they'll continue. And yeah, I have a lot more to say about it, but I'll pause here.
No. So I think it's fascinating. And first of all, I think you're definitely ahead of us when it comes to the issue of women on the boards. We are really failing in that big time. Again, I don't have the figures, but I know it's very low. So I'm working with some others, and we're looking to think how we can actually find out and map this now, and how we can get a kind of user feedback from women actually in mosques, so that it's not just about a list with do you have women's space or not, but going beyond that and deeper, and actually allowing women. So we're trying to figure out how best to do that. But this question of the boards and the makeup of boards is, we're really lacking here. So we can learn, and I'll be interested. I'm going to look up the FIC. Did you say the FIC Council of North America? Yeah.
Yes, I'll actually send you the link.
Yeah, please, and I'll include it in the sort of with these recording, because I think that would be quite interesting for people to see, and that kind of, in a way, that's leadership, right? So that is that. And I think it forces some change as well if you're hearing things at that kind of level. And what do you think needs to happen? I mean, let's just finish on this. What do you think needs to happen next? What else would you like to see in the US that you're not seeing at the moment?
Yeah, I actually think you put your finger to it when you were talking about what needs to happen in the UK. And that is, I think that we need to sit back and take stock of what changes actually did happen. And I think here we have an opportunity, now with COVID, everyone is at home. And one of the trends that occurred was, especially during the month of Ramadan, but also afterward, that a lot of religious lectures were given by and for women, and that were online, and now more people had access to women religious scholars. And before people would say, I don't know where to find women, or I don't know where to find a Black scholar, and it's like, no, now you can find them, and you can get them to speak in your masjid, because it's just a matter of turning on your computer screen. And I would love to see numbers on that. I want to see how many female religious scholars there are, how many of them have been speaking to mosques versus how many of them have been speaking from their own nonprofit organizations or in their own kind of circles in their own communities. I want to see what are the numbers in terms of the women on the boards, and then the women who did get elected to board, what was the retention rate, and was there actually movement? Like, if you are elected as a treasurer of a board, do you in the next cycle of the board, did more women also run for a position? And then do you see changes in terms of upward mobility and leadership for women? I'd like to see that as a study, or as like a revisiting of some of the earlier studies. And it's been a while. I think 2011 might have been the last one that I've seen of a comprehensive mapping of the U.S. mosques. I'd love to see that in terms of what was the movement, not just around women's access, but access to all marginalized people. And I think that we can do it better in terms of creating more inclusive spaces. We can think about, how can mosques include families who have members with disabilities, for example. I know of only a couple of mosques that hire interpreters for deaf people for their regular Friday khutbahs. Most mosques don't do that, right? And so I'd like to see that. I'd like us to, not just rest on our laurels. I want to see what more can we do. We hopefully we're constantly working to create and to embody the prophetic model in our masajid and in our organizations. And so, what does that look like? I think we need to step back and kind of review what has been happening, and then correct course if we need to, for the next 5 years.
And we're also at a very similar low level of even awareness of people with disabilities or special needs of any kind. The awareness, even no one talks about it here really. You know, the odd mosque here and there does sign language, but that's it. You know, it seems still as quite unusual. And so we're very much on the same page with you on that. So I think there's definitely kind of overlap here. I also want to make a point of saying, a bit like you did earlier, that I don't see myself as doing something that's different to what other people have done necessarily. I just think that sometimes you have to pick your moments and use whatever energy, knowledge, experience, networks that you have, and that's what I'm doing. That's what you're doing, building on. I have met Aisha actually, and you're right, mashallah, very amazing person, brings with her a presence. I felt when I actually met her, really, may Allah bless her. And so I think you know, I always see this as building on that, whatever people have done and are continuing to do. Sometimes, I don't know if it happens to you, but sometimes if I maybe make a suggestion or I'm speaking to people, your video's gone actually, Hind. Have you put your video?
Oh, I can,
Can you see me? Oh, you're just on there as a phone. It's fine. We'll carry on. I'll
okay.
look at you. It's all right. I know you're there somewhere. I think we just build on what's happening. Often people, so if I suggest something or I'm talking to people and they'll say, oh, but do you know that such and such a person is doing this training, or such and such a person has been doing that? And I kind of think, yeah, that's great. I'm not saying they have to stop while I do my thing. We're talking about, there's so much to do. You know, even in the half an hour that you and I have spoken, so many things have come up, and you've reminded me, jogged my memory, made me think about things in a different way. You know, there's so much to do in both our contexts, with overlap as well as differences. And so for me, there's a market that can never be saturated with anyone, because we just all need to do our things, cross over, collaborate where we can, respect what people have done before. I know people who are my age, even older, who are tired, are fed up. They don't want to do this anymore. I feel like at the moment anyway, alhamdulillah, I've got health, the energy. I'm going to do whatever I can with whatever I've been given. I'll get to a point as well where I won't want to or won't be able to do things, and other people will have taken it. And I could see some great younger voices coming through as well on this, who are not taking no for an answer and pushing and questioning. And I mean, that's amazing too. So I think it's, you know, for me, it's also about bringing in different people, using people's strengths. But like you, I don't see myself as doing something particularly new or different at all. I mean, you know, I also think that what we're talking about here is an era where, from a Me Too kind of point of view, where women are taking control of their own issues and speaking out much more because they know they can do that together. I think it's not a coincidence that for us here, certainly in the UK, there are women rising, let me say that, Muslim women rising and collaborating and talking behind the scenes. And it's amazing and very powerful. And I think, you know, and we can have these conversations across the Atlantic as well, as they say. And, you know, you can help us, we can help you. And I'm sure this mapping and trying to get more of a user voice across from a women's perspective, I think is a brilliant thing. And we can definitely work on that together. So look, in him, in the last 5 minutes, I just want to, I've got a thing called 5 in 5. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions. I've given you a bit of a heads up, so you know roughly what I'm going to ask you. Otherwise, it's not fair. I wouldn't put that on you at this at short notice. But I haven't given you lots of notice, but I have given you the questions a bit. And so the idea is literally just for people to get a sense of you, that's maybe different things that you haven't spoken about, that we haven't got time to delve into. And again, in a way, you'll be giving people just a small, sweet snapshot of bits of you that they haven't heard already. And we're not going to discuss them. So I'm going to resist the absolute temptation to ask you what you mean or any of that. I'm going to not do that. So you've literally got 5 minutes and 5 questions, and each one a minute, no more than a minute, and then we'll wrap up. Is that okay? So question number one. Tell me your favorite food and one of your favorite places in the world. Could be anything.
Okay, one of my favorite foods is what I had yesterday, which is kabali palau, and I absolutely love it. And I always joke that, you know, for a lot of Arabs, South Asian food is too spicy, and for a lot of South Asians, food is too bland. Let's have some Afghan food and make everyone happy. Have kabali palau, get that lamb shank in there, and get that spiced rice with raisins and all sorts of goodies. I love kabali palau.
Where did you have it? I'm not going to ask too many questions, but where did you have it yesterday?
Well, I went to a wonderful restaurant. They didn't pay me at all. It's called it's called Cabo House, and anyone who wants to come to Chicago, I will take you there.
Yeah,
I didn't actually go to the restaurant, but I picked it up and then I ate at a park.
Very nice.
And then one of my favorite places in the world has to be a library. I love libraries everywhere that I go. I love the British Library, by the way. That was the very first time I ever had high tea in the British Library. I was being a very loud American, and I enjoyed looking at the Sudanese and Egyptian hall, but I was kind of like, why is this here and not in Khartoum? But
yes,
that's okay.
Absolutely.
You know,
you would ask that a lot in this country. Unfortunately, we have lots of places where you would ask that. Why is that here? Unfortunately, we'll keep asking.
Clotted cream, great. But
amazing. And what about a favorite quote or saying? Anything?
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is Allahu jamilun wa yuhibbul jamal. Allah is beautiful and Allah loves beauty. And I think that that's something that a lot of us often forget, because there's so much ugliness in the world, maybe because we're so intensely focused on the issues that we're activists on. But you know what, Allah, and we're focused on justice and, all this stuff. And that's important, but we also have to remember that one of Allah's attributes is that He's beautiful. And Allah wants us to be also beautiful and to create a beautiful world. And I think that helps me often to ground myself in it. When you think, as the Quran asks us to do, when you think about all of Allah's signs, for me, I often think about nature, and nature is very beautiful, whether it's the sea or the trees or the stars. It's just, or the moon, right? The moon has been absolutely phenomenal these last few days. Just this reminder that the natural world and that Allah, that the creator, is beautiful, and that we as Allah's creations, let's try to always remember that as well, and try to implement beauty in our world.
It's a great, beautiful reminder of, especially for those of us, as you say, are in the kind of thick of it, and it can be easy to forget these things. Are very, very important. Brilliant. Yeah. So the next one would be, what lesson would you give your younger self? So the younger Hind, at whatever age you like, what lesson would you tell them? What would you tell her?
Yeah, I would say to younger Hind, get a mentor, right? It's especially hard when you don't see anyone who looks like you in the places where you want. Like, you can't be what you can't see, right? But you can at least try to find people. When I studied in university, I didn't have any female professors in my major, right? Like, all of my professors in the major that I chose were all men. And they were not necessarily inclined to help a young Black woman in hijab, because they didn't really see that we were similar to each other. But I would say, find a mentor. Reach out to somebody. Like, a lot of people, I think, looking back on it, they wanted to be a mentor. They wanted to give their advice and help, but I didn't read it that way. I didn't know what it was about. We can't get to where we want to be by ourselves. And why don't we just let people help us, get to that point? And then sort of point B to that is, your mentor doesn't always have to be older than you. And that's maybe a lesson that I would tell Hind in the future as well, to find yourself some young mentors, because young people are always hip to the latest, not just trends, but the latest ideas and the latest, young people are actually the ones who are moving the social justice revolutions all around the world. And, find your, have your circle of guides be people who are older than you and wiser than you and younger than you and wiser than you. And that's what I would tell myself.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. And I totally agree. What about a favorite Quran, a verse from the Quran, or a small part of the Quran, or a hadith? What would you choose there?
Yeah, it's small. It's inna ma'al usri yusra, right? Inna ma'al usri yusra. With verily, with hardship comes ease. And a lot of people sometimes they mistranslate that and they think it is after hardship comes ease. And it's actually with hardship comes ease. And I think it's actually a reminder for me too, and for anyone else who's been struggling with the pandemic and all kinds, everything that 2020 has been throwing at us, that hardship is, when you have hardship, it's not going to be hardship on its own, but there's also Allah promises us that there's also ease with that. And this isn't meant to gaslight or to belittle people's hard or difficult situations, but I hope that it's like a reminder, or of the hope of Allah's mercy as well, that with hardship there will always be ease, and that's a promise, right? And so that's been something that I've been holding on to in these difficult times.
And last but not least, what or who do you need in your life to help you to thrive?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is maybe something that I kind of call as like a God squad, And so when I give trainings to young people, I always say to them, find a God squad, right? Find people that you can party and pray with, right? And for me, my circle of friends and family and social support is really important. And that's something that, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I think that it's human nature to want to be in community with other people. But we are reminded that, choose those other people wisely, right? And I think for me, it's like that support that you get from people who will also be very honest with you when you need them to be honest with you. So it's not just like a cheering squad on the one hand, but it's like people who will pull you down when you need to be pulled down, pulled aside, and and help to kind of fix you to go on that correct way. And I think that's especially important when we're in a social media space where people become influencers based on how many people like them. And so you are maybe in an echo chamber, and it's very hard to tamp down the ego. It's very hard to kind of think about what's my actual ultimate goal. And so to have a God squad, to have like friends, close people who share your ethical values, right? And for me, they're not necessarily all Muslim either. The people who share an ethical value and moral compass that I do, and help you kind of reframe what you're thinking. And I think I don't think anyone can thrive in a space where, I think it's very difficult to thrive if you don't have even one person around you who can help to lend a hand. And I genuinely don't believe that anyone thrives or succeeds without other people. But I don't think that's possible. I mean, maybe it is, but I haven't seen it yet. No,
I absolutely agree. And that's why the Together We Thrive name, that's where it comes in, because it's really about, exactly that. So listen, we could speak, we have to be disciplined about the time. May Allah bless you for your honesty and sincerity and all of the work that you're doing and keeping it real and all of that. And, really is a blessing to know you, even if it is just across this screen. And I pray for you and all of what you're doing. And let's just keep this going as long as we have good health and life. inshallah, we'll work together. I pray that, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Ameen, inshallah. Thank you for the invitation. Inshallah, one day we'll get to see each other in
Yeah,
in
we'll have that
person
rice.
and get to
We'll
work
have that
together.
biryani or pilau. Was it
Yes.
pilau or biryani? I can't remember.
Yeah. Kabuli palau.
Pilau. Yeah. Very good.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You're very welcome.